So you want to tell us something, Jordan, about, I see that the project is divided into 3 segments, yes?
Right.
You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, now that Pete's kind of given you the analysis, the background of how we, kind of made our decisions, we'll just kind of walk through the entire layout of the Greenway. And we'll start kind of towards the south there in the stadium segment, which is in blue, where the right-of-way, which is the railroad right-of-way, and potentially, hopefully, the Greenway right-of-way, is basically flat at grade with the railroad. As we move north to the downtown segment, the railroad actually becomes elevated and is on a berm, which we'll see. And then further north to in the river segment, there in the yellow, it's still elevated, but to the west side, it actually comes back up to grade to meet the neighborhood. So here is just a little closer context of the stadium segment, which we'll go over first. And you can see the wider area there is actually a turntable park.
And what is Turntable Park?
Which we'll look at right now.
Okay.
Here. So Turntable Park is a segment in the railroad right-of-way where there were, there's actually an abandoned turntable there to the north.
Turntable where the trains turned around.
Right, yes.
Okay.
And there's also several kind of abandoned or not used anymore train tracks. That's why that segment is so wide. Then here in this section, you can actually see kind of our proposal, which is a 10 to 15 foot path. And then in the middle, we're actually incorporating the abandoned tracks in a park space. And because it's so wide, we have room for more trees, more vegetation than we will further north. The active rail area here is a lot wider than anywhere else because it looks like they actually keep 2 tracks maintained for use. That may or may not be the case. We're not sure. We're also proposing a kind of hard fence wall combination just for safety concerns. And then some of the kind of reoccurring design elements that you'll see are the solar lighting and benches that would be along the entire path.
I think it's interesting because, the report, there was another report done back in, I think, 2005, that talked about the unsightly and unfriendly areas of town along this pathway, and certainly this would correct that. I think unfriendly is a good way to look at some of these neglected areas.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be an important part in the entire Greenway is the use of vegetation. It can really help in aesthetics, but also it gives you the chance to plant native species, which can also have a lot of benefits.
Okay.
So we're actually going to keep moving north. If we can, this next slide is also in the stadium segment, but you can tell it's much narrower now. We're not in that kind of abandoned segment. The railroad width here is, or the right-of-way width here is 55 feet. Again, we still have the 10-foot path, the hard wall fence combination, and the reoccurring lighting and benches. And again, vegetation would be used wherever we can, wherever it'll fit and wherever we can possibly put it, just to soften the edges of the Greenway.
Is this low maintenance vegetation?
Ideally, yeah, we would like it, to be low maintenance. That would always help in maintenance costs and getting it initially put in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're moving north. So this is in the downtown segment, and you can see in the center of the screen there, Main Street, just a couple blocks north of this section. So and then West Park is to the sort of west there. So in this first parcel that we're looking at, this is at the corner of First and William, and people know it now as a parking lot, which you can see in the corner there. The goal of all of our parcel design, as well as the Greenway design, is to not only incorporate benefits that we've discussed before, but also use it as an opportunity to demonstrate green technology or sustainable ways of treating stormwater, things like that, that can provide educational opportunities. So, for instance, on this parcel, you can see in the sort of eastern edge there at the top, it says phytoremediation. That's where you use plants planted on a contaminated site in order to remove toxins from the soil. And this particular parcel has some toxins which have not been removed from it. And we think it's a really great opportunity to both show people how these plants can be used and also to clean up the site itself.
Okay.
And this site would be a wonderful amenity for people, especially downtown workers, who could come there and picnic during the lunchtime.
Because it's right at the edge.
It's right at the edge of the downtown. And it also incorporates on the northern end a splash pool for children to use in the summer. And finally, it has at the east, see that spur sticking up. It incorporates an accessible switchback ramp to make the steep grade coming down William Street more accessible to people in wheelchairs or with strollers.
Switchback means it zigzags.
It zigzags back and forth.
Back and
yes,
forth.
yes.
So that's a wonderful idea.
So that's something that Pete is particularly proud of.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea to make it so accessible. Yes, that's really great. Okay.
So moving then to the next park, you can see this is slightly north, and this is actually adjacent to the YMCA. The park itself is in, again, city-owned property, which is currently being used for parking. You can see the existing conditions there. And this is something that we think with the new library lot, which is increasing the parking capacity downtown so much, that these parcels are really have opportunities to be so much more than parking lots. We really think.
I have to interject that Alice took me on a walk, and I was amazed at the size of that lot. I mean, that goes from, was it Liberty to Washington?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking acres of just blacktop. So I think, the picture shows it, but to stand there, I was like, really? All this ugliness? I don't know. Yes, go ahead.
So on this site has less contamination, so we're using this as an opportunity to incorporate some green stormwater technology. You can see running along the top of the site on the eastern edge is a bioswale, which...
Want to define that? Tell us what a bioswale is?
Yes, so it would be indentation in the ground, which would be planted with native vegetation, and it would serve to slow stormwater down so that the particulates drop out of it and don't enter the river, but also then it cleans up the water as well by taking those contaminants out of the water.
Because the stormwater flows directly into the Huron, right?
Right, that's right. It flows into the Allen Creek and right into the Huron. And it's flowing over parking lots and streets and picking up all sorts of contaminated sediment. So that's a major part of our design. And you can see also that this design has a lot of green space. As Pete mentioned, there's a lack of green space in the downtown core. And this being right across this, Washington from the YMCA, we thought this was a great chance to incorporate some open space for families to use. And then in the southwestern corner, which is for us the bottom right corner, there is an amphitheater which takes advantage of the natural hill there. We believe that's a wonderful opportunity to provide a community center for people to come and watch outdoor movies, outdoor plays, or have events. And it might even be able to provide some revenue which could be used in the maintenance of the Greenway itself. So we think that's a really important aspect. If you move north then, you looking at the next slide, we have a trail segment showing that the railroad is elevated here. So Jordan mentioned that. And so we have an opportunity to potentially expand into an easement there on the side, depending on what the land is being used for along the tracks in this space. There's some land that's sort of open, but primarily we have this narrower trail, as Jordan mentioned, with the solar lighting and the same benches which would be used to unify the trail along its length. that same native planting and separation of a fence there.
Okay.
And the third and final segment of the Greenway is what we're calling the river segment. It starts at about Miller and runs north to Argo. And right there in the middle of the screen, you can see 721 North Main, which is the largest of the 3 parcels that was identified for a potential inclusion into the Greenway. So on 721, there's actually enough of this site, which is outside of the floodway. So we have chosen to site a building that could possibly spur some economic generation for local businesses. And also this site houses a large section of restored prairie to serve as habitat and increase the native plant variety, biodiversity in the area. It also helps with stormwater by slowing down runoff and before it drains into a swale, as Ariel described. It runs down almost the entire site and filters water before it enters into the Allen Creek drain. On the eastern edge of this site also, well, it's actually off-site, but there's the Ann Arbor Community Center. So right behind that, we've chosen to locate urban agriculture plots, which has been proven to really increase the sense of community and is increasing greatly in popularity, especially in Ann Arbor. And as we move a little bit further north, this is what a typical trail segment would look like along this portion. The railroad has come back up and met grade on the left-hand side, as you can tell, right before it crosses the Huron River. So here you have a little bit larger of a right-of-way. It's about 110 feet. And again, you can see additional room for native plantings, the solar lighting, the benches, and a fence for safety to separate people from the track. And the last piece of this is actually an expanded right-of-way similar to what you saw with the Turntable Park. However, this one is caused by the abandoned rail segment where the Ann Arbor Railroad used to tie in to the Norfolk Southern Railroad, which is just to the north. And that's the line that Amtrak runs on. So again, we have a little bit extra room here. We've incorporated the tracks into the path.
Yes.
And that really just tries to speak to the character of the railroad and the history of the space. Right. One of the other great parts about this Northern Spur Park is that it could serve as a gateway to people entering into Ann Arbor from the border-to-border trail, which actually brings up the next slide, which is how do you actually make this connection? Because as you can tell from this central photograph, in order to cross over to Argo, where the border-to-border trail comes in, you have to cross both Main Street and the Norfolk Southern Railroad. Those are 2 significant barriers. So the way we've chosen to solve this is by capitalizing on our elevation and building a bridge across both of them. That way it maintains pedestrian traffic flow, rail traffic flow, and automobile traffic flow unimpeded. And then the ramp will spiral down and meet up with the ground. And that way the entire thing is barrier-free, handicap accessible. And then we basically would use Argo Dam to cross to the other side of the river, which is how it works now.
Lovely, lovely. Did you think, Alice?
I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I have to admit, too, that I've seen parts of this, of their presentation before, but as each presentation is made, it gets more and more interesting, and I learn more and more. Even though we've been talking about it for a long time, we still learn more.
Yes.